This is an important message for parents, teachers, school administrators, school boards, county school boards, and state school boards. My name is Peggy Hall, and I've been an educator for over 30 years. I am the former director of teacher education at UC Irvine Extended Education. I ran grant programs and I oversaw K-12 professional development for teachers. And I currently am adjunct faculty at a community college. I want to share with you the facts and the myths about the guidance in the state of California regarding opening up the schools. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you here, and this will take you to the governor's guidance that is for schools and school-based programs. And I want you to look at that word guidance because that is a key word, and that's exactly what it means. These are guidelines. So the first fact that I want to clarify is that these are not laws and they are not enforceable by law. These are guidelines only. And let me share with you some very important points about these guidelines. These are the most recent from June 5th. And I want to bring you through to this first paragraph that states the guidance is not intended to revoke or repeal any employee rights. That is a very important point and a very important sentence in these guidance guidelines. And so I want to also share with you that the guidance also states that the Cal OSHA has more safety and health guidance here. So we are going to click through, and that is going to take us to the Cal OSHA website, and that is the link, and that's of May 13th. I want to bring your attention to this paragraph related to the use of cloth face covers, and that's what we call masks. And even in the Cal OSHA safety and health guidance, it clearly states right here in the third point that cloth face covers are not protective equipment and do not protect the person wearing a cloth face cover from COVID-19. So just to be clear, the masks and the face coverings that they're requiring or recommending, because guidance really is recommendations, the cloth face covers that they are strongly recommending in the guidance do not protect the person from COVID-19. So that's fact number two. Fact number one is that these are guidelines and not requirements. That's why it's called guidance. Fact number two, the face coverings or face masks, according to Cal OSHA, which is the body that oversees workplace safety, they state that the cloth face coverings do not protect against COVID. And further, Cal OSHA also directs you to look at the CDC. And I want to show that again, that the CDC guidelines. So let's click through to the CDC guidelines. And the CDC guidelines have a page, include a page that say recommendation regarding the use of cloth face coverings. And I am going to give you a link to another video, and I will give you a link to all of this information for your further research and reference. And under the Attorney General's video where he shows you how to make a face cloth out of an old scarf, there are several studies which I researched, and I read every single one of those studies, and not one of them is about wearing a mask, and not one of them has conclusive evidence that healthy people, and especially children, wearing a mask has any health benefit whatsoever. I will give you a link to that for your further research and knowledge. But just to be clear, another fact is that on the CDC page, that the school district and the governor of California, and likely in your state, if you're watching this from out of California, all roads lead back to the CDC. And on their page with the recommendation, they do not have any scientific backing for that recommendation. So I just want to be clear about that. And you may say, well, maybe it's just a good idea, even if there's no conclusive scientific evidence of wearing a face covering. It might work, right? Isn't it better to be safe than sorry? Well, let's look at a recent article in the New England Journal of Medicine. The New England Journal of Medicine is a reputable journal, and here we have it. This is dated May 21st, which is a very recent, here we are, May 21st, so this is recent information. And the very second paragraph states, and this is by, medical doctors here. We've got medical doctor, masters of public health, medical doctor, masters of public health, business. These are very well, these are reputable authors in this journal, which is a peer-reviewed journal. Not every article that is submitted is accepted. That's what peer-reviewed means, that they undergo strict review and only publish what adheres to the standard of this journal. So this, in other words, the source is quite solid. The authors state, we know that wearing a mask outside of healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. This is a fact. So we have OSHA telling us that the face masks do not give any protection from COVID. We have the CDC providing zero reputable, conclusive medical or scientific evidence in favor of healthy people or asymptomatic people wearing a face mask. In fact, the Surgeon General at the beginning of the COVID crisis came out very strongly stating that the face masks were not to be worn by anyone unless they were sick, or they were caring for someone who was sick, or that they were in a medical setting. So here's the third strong piece of evidence that says we know that wearing a mask outside of healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. So let's go back to the state guidance. These are not requirements. These are not laws. These are not even health orders. This is guidance, which means a recommendation. And the guidance sends you to the Cal OSHA, and the guidance also sends you to the CDC. And let's look at some of these and some of the general measures which seem reasonable and attainable. And let's go here, how to promote healthy hygiene practices. So you're being asked to teach and reinforce hand washing, avoiding contact with one's eyes, nose, and mouth, and covering coughs and sneezes. That is solid medical advice that we have been following. It's doable, it's reasonable, and that is something that can be implemented without any hardship. So the students should be taught how to use a tissue and wash their hands. So all of these points look pretty good. I'll just leave them for now. But when I go to the bottom, this is the point that's causing a lot of concern for parents and teachers. And it is to teach and reinforce the use of cloth face coverings. Let's see where that takes us. Oh, it takes us back to the CDC. And we already know that the CDC does not have any reputable, conclusive scientific evidence in favor of healthy people wearing masks. In fact, it is the opposite. So let's go back to that page, because there's something very important here I want to share with you. And stating that, so to teach the children about wearing the cloth face coverings or masks or face shields. And even the guidance states that the face coverings are most essential when physical distancing is not practicable. I will have another video about physical distancing, because there is no reputable, conclusive science regarding that either. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We are healthier when we are in contact with other human beings. We actually have an opportunity for our acquired immune system to develop and strengthen. And I am not a doctor, but I will give another video with evidence from doctors about this. The next point states that all staff should use cloth face coverings. And I would like to direct your attention to the word should. Should is actually, it's a type of legal language, and it's not must. And it's different. Should is guidance. Should is a recommendation. It is not a requirement, and it is not a law, and it is not something that is legally enforceable by law. I just want to make sure you are clear on the language and on the facts and the myths, because I know there's been a lot of confusion over this, and that's why I would like to clarify. Further, it says, unless Cal/OSHA standards require respiratory protection. And a respirator is different than a cloth mask. That is something that is considered personal protective equipment. It is approved by the FDA. There is very strict protocol for putting on this type of respirator and taking it off. You have to have medical clearance, and you have to have a physical exam by a licensed doctor who then gives written medical clearance that you are physically fit enough to wear a respirator. And the reason why is because respirators are proven to cause reduction in oxygen intake. You can have health problems like heart palpitations, and I will give you a link to the Cal/OSHA standards regarding respiratory protection. Furthermore, Cal/OSHA and OSHA, the federal government, has standards that are set for oxygen levels in the atmosphere. This is very important. These are government recognized and established minimum levels of oxygen that need to be maintained in a confined area. The oxygen levels in the atmosphere may not go below 19.5%. Otherwise, according to OSHA and Cal/OSHA, the individual is at risk for what is called IDLH, and that means immediate danger to life and health. Further, the language goes on to state irreversible adverse effects, which can be seen in losing brain cells and having brain damage because of lack of oxygen to the brain. Oxygen is the most necessary, essential component of life. And when we obstruct oxygen by wearing a mask, we are reducing oxygen and breathing in carbon dioxide. I will give links to countless doctors and very strong, compelling evidence against the wearing of a mask for those very reasons, because the wearing of a mask not only reduces oxygen to your brain, again, which can have an irreversible adverse effect, as acknowledged and stated in the OSHA standards. In California, I believe that is section 5144 of the Respiratory Protection at Work regulations. I have had people share with me their use of an oxygen monitor inside a mask, and that oxygen monitor starts beeping as soon as it goes below 19.5, and he measured it at 18.5. So the wearing of a cloth mask in these cases can directly violate OSHA standards. And for teachers, for students, it's actually very harmful. Now, I'm just looking at the facts here because I want to explain that the fact number one is that these are guidelines. They are not requirements and they are not laws. Fact number two is that the evidence regarding face masks is not only weak, it's non-existent. In fact, it's the opposite. Cal/OSHA states in their guidelines that the cloth masks do not prevent against COVID illness. And further, the respirators, which are approved by the FDA language, and I will give you a link, also states that these do not protect against illness or death. So having this measure where even this most recent article in the New England Journal of Medicine states that outside of a healthcare setting where doctors are face-to-face with ill patients, the use of a mask has no value. I just want to make sure that that's clear, because what I would like to talk about next, and those are the main things that I want to share with you, and it does talk about the proper use, removal, and washing of cloth face coverings. What happens, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, is there have been countless medical professionals who have spoken out about the harms of wearing the face coverings. Just from a physical standpoint, there is going to be a reduction in oxygen. There is going to be a harming of the respiratory system. There is a harming of the immune system, because all of those systems require on the free flow of oxygen. Now, there are also psychiatrists and psychologists that have spoken out and are already documenting the psychological harms for children wearing masks. Not only for themselves, the child himself or herself wearing the mask, which is very terrifying and very threatening. There's cases of claustrophobia, of panic, of anxiety, but looking at an adult and the child is unable to see the facial expressions, the smiles. When we are learning, we learn. I teach teachers how to teach. We teach with the whole body, with our gestures, our facial expressions. Also, the language is obscured. Are you able to hear me when I'm talking with something over my mouth? Were you able to hear me? I don't think so. How are young children able to hear in a classroom? Another guidance is to wear a clear face shield. I find that personally very offensive as a teacher. All of my teaching and all of my professional development has been about reducing the barriers for student-teacher interaction. We want to put the students at the center, not have them be separated and distant and be faced with these adults who look menacing by wearing these face masks. It is harmful on a physical level, on an emotional level, a psychological level, on an instructional level. So I want to share with you, I want to repeat that in case I think the screen froze, that the harms of wearing a mask are irrefutable. It is harmful on a physical level. It is harmful on a psychological level. It is harmful on an instructional level. So those are 3 strikes against the face mask, and there is nothing to support it. I want to remind you that you have the power in your own school district, in your own schools, really in your own classroom, because of there is some freedom in the way that we teach our students. And I also want to address the issue of liability. This is a very important point that I believe there's a lot of confusion surrounding it. Liability exists in every school, in any place of business. Any child could slip and fall. Any child could choke on a piece of food in the school cafeteria. So there is always risk involved in having children at a school. There could be other things that happen in the school. There could be a fire, there could be an earthquake, there could be other situations where the children's lives and the teachers' lives are at risk. So that is why there is also liability and liability insurance and other kinds of insurance that prevent it, or that will take care of that risk. The question comes up, what about someone getting sick and catching this illness at the school? Wouldn't the school be liable for that? Let me explain the law. This is the law in California. There is actually a law, and I will give you a link to that, that is exactly about communicable diseases. First of all, you cannot catch a disease from a location. That is not recognized in the law. You can only catch a disease from an infected person. Now, the infected person has to know that they are infected, and this is the most important point. Number 3, that infected person has to intentionally seek to infect another individual. So number 1, you don't catch it from a school. You don't catch it, the law does not recognize that. You don't catch it from the playground. You don't catch a disease from a doorknob. You don't catch a disease from sharing a book. You don't catch a disease from using the same playground equipment. That is not recognized by law. I'm speaking in California. Secondly, you can only catch a communicable disease from another person. That's what it means to communicate it to another person. That person has to know that they have it. And the most important, it has to be proven in a court of law that that person intentionally gave that or sought to give that disease to another individual. As you can see, that is highly unlikely and would be a very weak case for a person to bring that against a defendant because of the world that we live in. How would they know that the person didn't catch that from someone else? So you can put your mind at ease regarding any liability, any special liability regarding this illness. It should not fall outside of your regular liability that you carry with your school. I am not giving legal advice. I am not a lawyer. I am giving information and education. I am not a doctor. I'm not giving medical advice. I am giving information and links for you to educate yourself and to make an educated decision. Now, the other question that comes up is regarding money. Will you be denied any money if you don't follow the state guidance? That is something that your school district and school boards need to look at. But let me point this out. If you have countless parents keeping their children out of the public schools because of these onerous, unfounded, unscientific, unmedically grounded guidelines, think of the money that you won't be getting because your schools will be empty. I would love to address your school board. I would love to address your school, the administrators. I am available for these public speaking opportunities. And again, Peggy Hall, I would like to thank you for listening to this message, and please do all of the research. You as educators have a high calling. You are shaping the lives of these young children. Do you really want to shape their lives in an atmosphere of fear, of menacing, where they can't see your face, where you can't see theirs, where they can't hear you, where their brains are not going to be functioning optimally? What about the lawsuits that you might get from brain damage? What about the lawsuits you might get from children passing out of lack of oxygen? That is where my attention and concern would go. Thank you again, and I look forward to hopefully speaking to you about this in person so we can set those guidelines aside and get back to the very important goal of educating the youth and building the future of our country.